Morning, morning, morning. I am so excited to be with you here today. We're going to be talking about retiring early, and easy retirement, fun retirement. There's got to be a word for that. Retirement. I'm a little delirious. Sorry, y'all. Super tired. But I'm here today with Dara Herring, who is going to talk to us about her life post work, right?
hmm
Black
Post corporate grind.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I'm so excited about this today, guys. She's going to give us all the scoop. And so, welcome, Dara. Dara, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's so interesting being on the other side of this live here, considering that
Mhm.
I met you um, virtually, Rashida, before you even knew. Um, and when I first saw your CNBC video a couple of years ago, didn't even know it planted a seed. And that's one of the things that directly led me to be where I am right now, which is in Mexico City. Um, and I am here. I am now officially considering myself retired. Retired is the word that I have used with my advisor, as we have double checked all of my numbers. And I am attempting to make it a fun retirement. I'm about a year and a half into this process. I would say I'm probably just starting to come out of the burnout zone. So I'm still recouping, from all of those years of the grind. I'm originally from Philly, uh, West Philadelphia, born and raised. I went to Penn State for undergrad. I worked in consulting, moved around the US because, I was easily bored. Um, Went back to graduate school, did all the things from a corporate, fast track perspective, worked in the corporate environment. And, was never one that wanted to be anybody's CEO, but was raised to believe that, um, the work that I did was important to who I was and, how I showed up in the world. My grandfather was the first Black Ironworkers Union chief in the country. And so my sister and I joke all the time that like we came by our workaholism very honestly. Since I was a little kid, we always heard, you beat your boss into the office, you're the last one to leave. Like that kind of work ethic was built into us. And, I took that and ran. Um, so I spent time in big corporate environments. I spent time in startups, burnt myself out a couple of times, wound up with drum roll please, Black woman in the United States of America in the corporate world, and autoimmune disease, and still kept right on going. Um, I'm single with no children. And so I sort of let the the work that I did really define kind of who I was. And finally, at the height of the pandemic, watching those fools climb the Capitol building, because I was actually based in the DC area at that time. Um, Spending a lot of time on YouTube, stumbling about people like you and Stephanie Perry and Picky Girl. I just decided I'm out of here. I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. Put together a plan, and in less than a year, I had my money right, paid off all my debt, sold or gave away everything I owned, took a scouting trip to Mexico City for 6 weeks, waited until the day after my bonus hit my bank account, quit my job, and have been here in Mexico City ever since. Was that
Okay,
enough?
so that was the longest introduction ever. But to hit all the important points, because now people know what they should ask questions about, right? Like we're laying the foundation. You laid the foundation. I don't even have to do any work. So
You're welcome.
thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I want to start from the top. Um, you said nothing's off the table. So how old were you when you retired?
Oh, well,
When you
I'm
stopped
50.
working? When you stopped working?
Well, I'm 52 now, so I
Mhm.
was 50, 51.
You're
I don't
50?
know, girl. Yeah, something
Okay.
like that. I don't know numbers.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm a little early. I tried to hang in there till 55. Couldn't do it.
I
Couldn't do
mean,
it.
some people try to hang in till 70, so, you got out early. You got out early.
I
Um,
tried, girl.
how
I
I
did
laugh.
give you everything.
You gave me everything. I laugh because you said you didn't, you're just now calling yourself retired a year and a half, year and more than a half into it.
About a year and a half.
Um, did you think you were did you think you were going back to work?
No. I knew that I was not going back to work the way that I worked before.
Mhm.
I think in the corner of my mind, I wondered if it might not be smart, prudent, responsible. I'm also firstborn, so you know how that works. To get like a part-time job, take a part-time job. Girl, I can't even wake up in the morning. The fact that I am here today, it is what, 9 a.m. Mexico City
I
time?
definitely sent you that message early morning, like, if she doesn't get this, I'm changing the topic real quick because if I don't get a
Well,
response from her.
when you asked me what I was doing at 9 o'clock, I was like, she means PM, right?
Okay, if I ask any of you what you're doing at 9 o'clock, it is not PM. Guaranteed, it is
Well,
not PM. I
well,
don't have 9 PM business.
knowing it was you, I was like, oh Lord, she means AM.
I do, and here we are. Here we are.
And here we are. So yeah, there was a part of me that wondered, I could do a little part-time something. Especially because again, my job, they're such givers. They tried to make it really easy on me. They wouldn't let me quit, which is funny because remember, so I was in your group coaching program. You were like, so what are you gonna do when? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Okay, y'all, wait, wait,
They
wait, 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 wait. No, no, no. We're gonna tell them what I said. We're gonna tell them because I love to be right. I said to her when she was talking about this job, I said, "What are you gonna do when they make you an offer that is really, really hard to refuse to get you to not leave?" Because now let me tell you why. This woman was like, I wake up in the morning and I work and I work and I work until I go to sleep. And then maybe in my sleep, I do some more work. And then I get up in the morning and do like extra work. And then I'm working all day long. And then I do some more work. And I was like, they're not gonna let you leave. Like you're you're doing the job of like two or three people. They're not gonna let you leave. And she was like, no, 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 no. It'll be fine. I'm just gonna quit. It'll be fine. When they make you an offer, that sounds really, really good. What are you going to do? And then what happened?
So
Mhm,
okay,
mhm,
fine. I
mhm,
agreed with you at the
mhm,
end, and I was
mhm,
prepared because, the president of the business unit was actually a really good friend of mine. So I was prepared for that. And when she started going into her, but what about? But what about?
mhm,
How about this? How about this? Um, she knew that I'd come and visit, what about working part-time? What about working in Mexico? And I was like, baby, I said to her, you could pay me 4 times what
mhm,
you are paying me right now
mhm,
for part-time, and
mhm,
I'm still leaving. And she was like, oh. So it wasn't a matter of like them giving me an offer, but they were like, well, we'll tell you what, we're not going to process your termination. We'll just leave you in the system.
You might change your mind. You might wanna come
You
back to Big
You
Daddy.
you might wanna come back, and because we're such givers, we wanna make it easy on you. Because if you wanna come back, then that way we don't it's not a whole new process. So we'll just keep you on the books for 6 months. We'll give you healthcare, and then as long as you don't mind us calling you in 6 months to check in and see how you're doing, like, is that okay? I'm like, "I don't ca" I said, "That's fine, but where do I send my computer? Because 'Cause you're getting all your stuff back. I mean, you can call me, but you won't be, there won't be any of this. So that was how I left. So there was a part of me that said, I could call them and say, hey, listen, I'll give you 90 days. Come up with something for me to do. And I was like, 90 days at a loaded rate above what I was making before. I could live high on the hog. It's not worth it.
Mm-mm.
It's not worth it. And I don't think that my ability to bite my tongue works anymore. I was the one who everybody came to. I soothed all the egos. I calmed all the stuff down. And, I was the one after the meeting, Dara, can I talk to you? Don't nobody would want to have a conversation with me at all, ever.
Can we talk about backing up a second?
Mhm.
What This might require a little bit of processing. I'm not your therapist, but I want you to go there today with me. Can we
Yes,
talk
ma'am.
about how you fell into the depths of workaholism?
Um, well, like I said, I think a lot of it was coming by it honestly, sort of hearing that messaging in my family because I came from a family of union workers, you
Mhm.
know, and I grew up very close to my grandfather, and he was very much about work ethic.
But
Yes.
even union workers have boundaries. In fact, they have very strong boundaries.
Um, so I think the way that I would respond to that is I think and of course I obviously wasn't around when my grandfather was working. I
Mhm.
think that it was the a little bit of that whole self-sacrifice thing,
Mhm.
right? And I
Mhm.
think for me, being a woman in particular, it showed up very differently. My grandfather, because of the time period where he came around, he was fighting physical racism, like on behalf, and like sort of standing up for the people, trying to get Black people
Mhm.
into the union and like fighting these white men. I mean, it was construction in Philly. Like my mother, they had gangsters at the house, right, for dinner to help him get to where he was. For me, it was that nurturing thing and always taking care of people and always making people comfortable. And the fact is, I was good at it. And so I think I got a lot of validation from it because at the end of the day, um, what does it say? We're animals, right? We don't do what doesn't get rewarded. So as much as I complained about it, until it became at least a habit and maybe my only way of working, it felt good to me to be needed,
Mhm.
to be like, oh my God, Dara will come and save us. I fed into that whole thing. Um, and I mean, listen, you want to turn it into a Sunday morning therapy session? We can. But I'll say, I think like a lot of people, I probably had that part of me that was like, am I enough? Sort of holistically. And work was one place where I got that,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and then it took a turn.
Okay, so that's where I wanted to go next because you overwork yourself, and even when you knew you were overworking yourself, it was really hard to get out of that, like, overwork, of that overgiving, of that this is what they've gotten accustomed to. So this is how I've gotten ahead, this is how I've been successful, this is what I keep doing. So let's talk about the turn that took for you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think the turn, because I've spent some time thinking about like when did it change, right? Like
Mhm.
when did it become all encompassing? Getting older
Mhm.
played in, right? Didn't have the energy levels that I used to, right? Where I would eventually turn it off and then, go out and turn up, right? And let that stress out. Um, the other thing that I've realized, I was a late age diagnosed ADHD woman.
Mm.
I was, a quote unquote gifted child. I was high performing, so I was not the typical ADHDer. As a Gen Xer, I thought ADHD people were those who ran around the classroom and was disruptive and all that. My mother used to always say she thought she had ADHD, and I didn't pay her any mind. She was a teacher, so I should have known. But I got to a job. I was working in Boston. I was head of product development for a startup company, and the only word I can use to describe my minute by minute feeling was overwhelmed. I was so overwhelmed. And I spent so much time and energy trying to cover it up with the fashionable clothes and the acting as if and the swagger and, this, that, and the other. I was the only black vice president they'd ever had. Um, and eventually I remember I mean, I'm like, this is like embarrassing to admit. Like, I knew all the cleaning people in the office. Like, I would be in the office at like Friday after work until like 1 o'clock in the morning, like just constantly trying to get caught up on things. And eventually, hearing my mother talk about ADHD rang in my head, and I checked out a book like on Kindle, like ADHD in women. And it like kind of ran through a bunch of chapters talking about signs and symptoms. And the way that it spelled it out was it would give an example of a woman in like her situation. And I just read that book and just tears flowing down my face. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm not broken. Um, so I say all this to say, I eventually got diagnosed, and the psychotherapist that I worked with, she said that I had a pretty bad case of ADHD. The more senior I got in the organization, the less natural boundaries in my job description. And I never learned how to set boundaries for myself. So that's my long answer to your question, right? Like at some point, my job responsibilities and the level of visibility overcame the
Mhm.
coping mechanisms I've developed.
Okay.
And I was unmoored,
Okay.
untethered.
Now, about what year would you say that the way you were working was not ideal? Or is that your entire life?
No, not my entire life. I would say that was, oh God, years. I don't know, child. I'm getting old. I can't tell you the exact year but I can tell you that was the job that triggered me being diagnosed with lupus. I know that was the job that did it.
Right.
Um, it's in my family. That was maybe 2015, maybe 2015,
And it's
something like that.
2015 when you were diagnosed, or was that
Mm.
after? Okay.
Oh, child, it was a whole thing. I mean, and in the end, I wound up being made the scapegoat for this acquisition the company made. I got fired for the first time in my life on a like Monday, and I was diagnosed with lupus that Wednesday because I had wound up in the hospital. And um whatever. So it was a whole thing. I had some friends at the company, and they're just like, I would press charges, and it was just this whole thing where I should have left that job after a year. I was there
Mhm.
for 4 years because I was determined. Well, first of all, for the first 2 years, I figured, I thought it was me. I was
Mhm.
like, what? Why am I broken? Why can't I figure this out? Then I was
Mhm.
like, I can figure it out. Till the universe was like, how about you sit your butt down and just be sick and think about it.
Looking back now, can you see that like that firing was a blessing?
100%. One, I'm sorry, 1,000%. Um, it was a blessing in a couple of ways. So it did lead me to set boundaries in my next. Oh, somebody made the comment, menopause. Girl, nothing but a word. I didn't even know the perimenopause was playing in. I should have actually, that was part of the reason why the last position was the last position. Um, but being let go at that job, first of all, I had to process being fired.
Mhm.
Fi-
Me,
If I
me, which also I know because I've talked to you a bunch, I know that that has to be hard on like a skills level. Like, no, I can do this, but also in like a y'all don't even deserve me from day one level. Like,
listen, and it's not as if, all my colleagues, so part of my terms of my package was I couldn't talk to nobody,
mhm,
right? Because I was the last one that anybody would have ever seen getting fired, like whether it was the other VPs or the rest of the staff. Um, so yes, it wasn't really skill. Skill was never the challenge. Because one of the other issues with ADHD is not just the setting of boundaries, it's the ability to figure out what you can actually do. So it was
mhm,
less skills
mhm,
and more about capacity,
mhm.
right? So when people would say, "Hey, could you do this, that, and the other?" I don't know. I was so used to always saying sure,
Sure.
right? And I just pull an all-nighter and
Mhm,
deliver brilliant work. But the older you get, like all-nighters are cute at 20 and
mhm.
maybe 30. At 40, that ain't cute. So yeah, it was a huge bruise to my ego. It also was just like, if I was gonna get fired, I should have been working 3 hours a day, not 12.
If y'all weren't gonna appreciate this brilliance anyway, why'd I give it to you? Why am I in the
Ex-
hospital now? So
exactly.
you ended up in the hospital. You got diagnosed with lupus. What came next?
So next, I just floundered. I couldn't figure out what to do next. I sort of stayed where I was at the time. I was in Boston. First thing I was like, oh, I'm gonna collect this unemployment because my unemployment check was actually kind of nice. So I was like, I'm gonna ride this till the wheels fall off. Um, and I stayed up in Boston, and kind of dabbled. It was a lot of startups there, so a lot of folks reached out to me, but they wanted me for the same kind of job. And I knew I didn't want that kind of job, but I couldn't figure out what I wanted. So it wasn't time wasted. I was also pretty sick off and on and just, miserable. And I feel like it was important to just kind of sit in it. And sometimes I do have the habit of kind of flitting around a little bit. And so I was like, let me just, till I have a plan, let me just sit still. But the plan became, oh, my next unemployment check comes next week. So I'm gonna get that and pack up this car and this dog, and I'm gonna drive back down to Maryland. So moved back down to Maryland, moved in with my sister because I was like, well, I don't know where I'm gonna be working, what I'm gonna be doing, so I don't want to get a place yet. And that was when I started watching YouTube, and I stumbled across these like art journaling
Mhm,
videos, and I just started binge watching these videos all the time. And um, I was probably in the end between Boston and Maryland, unemployed for about a year. By the time I got to Maryland, my perspective was all I want to be is a product manager. I don't want to have direct reports. I don't want to be anybody's VP. I want to be a director. Like, I just want to be able to go in, do the job, come out. Because I knew that that might help me in terms of boundary setting. So while I'm looking for those positions and being challenged, because everybody's like, you're overqualified. My sister comes home one day, she throws a package at me, and I'm like, what's this? And she's like, well, you're always sitting here watching these painting videos. Why don't you go ahead and just try it? And I'd never done anything creative in my life before. So I started just, throwing some watercolor on a page and doing some journaling and doing some sketching. Um, and that was a big, big change in my life. It kind of became like my own art therapy.
Mhm.
And that's been huge for me. Because now, creativity and art making, I always say I feel like I have new eyes now. And if I had not been let go of that job, I don't think this is something I would have tapped into.
Okay. You would have been at that job till that job killed you, huh?
Girl.
Working all day. Okay. So doing the art therapy, you find a new job. When do you realize that maybe not the job itself, but the
Mhm.
end result of the new job looks a lot like the end result of the last job, in that you're burned
So
out, etc.
mhm. So, there were a couple of jobs there, but I was what I thought I was very good at, like, sort of setting the boundaries. They wanted to put me on the succession plan. I don't wanna be on your succession plan. I'm not climbing the ladder. I don't wanna be here, but they wanted me for all that stuff, and I pushed back. Um, so, I was a little proud of myself about that. Um, but what I found was, insidiously, I ended up taking things on and kind of working at that level.
And not getting paid for that level?
Now they did, and now they would always give me more money,
Mhm.
but if I had gone ahead and taken the position, then it would have been even more money. So it was at that point, and again, it's there's the pandemic, there's politics, there's George Floyd, there's all that DEI BS going on at my company, and I'm on the global committee for that, and this, that, and the other. Um, on top of me now sort of being back to working these crazy hours. Um, and now it's sort of normalized a little bit because everybody else is working at home too. Because I was a work at home person. But now everybody else is working at home too. So it's sort of normalized.
And I'm
Um,
guessing that your work from home situation was well, if you don't have the time to commute, if you don't have to commute, you can just work in that time, right?
well, yeah. And see, I don't think nobody had that expectation of me, but it was now other people were starting to do it. Because see,
Mhm.
before when it was like only me and maybe a handful of other people that would work at home, the overall culture would do the knock off and commute home. And that would sort of help me as a
Mhm.
side effect. But now that everybody's just looking at their computer, you know, all the time, and it was a high performing organization. I want a low performing organization. Where are those at? But anyway, it was a high performing organization. So yeah, it just got to be too much. And it wasn't worth it. So it slowly crept back in, even though I was doing a little bit better at the boundary setting. But I also found that while I didn't have as much of the sort of senior leadership people responsibilities, although some of those crept back in, I was back to doing a whole lot of the emotional labor.
Mhm.
My manager, he's
Mhm.
now sensitive about what somebody said to him at the meeting, and he's feeling insecure. And so now he's going to volunteer. I just a whole, but I was like, I'm not your mammy.
So I had that experience myself in that I went through 3 managers at my last job, and I
Oof.
was never the consideration of promoting me was never there. But the whole team treated me like I was the whole team treated me like I was a manager, and all the client because person I was the only responsive person in office. the whole, all of our clients
Mm.
treated me like I was in charge of everything. And so it was the same situation of like, we have weekly meetings, but our manager never shows up. And so people expect me to, I'm the next senior person. So I'm expected to lead the meeting. And eventually I had to say, because listen, at work, I'm good with boundaries. So at work, I was just like, no, I won't. If he's like, I would stop, because if I was there, they would expect me to leave the meetings. I just told them, message me when he shows up. Because if
Mm.
I'm here, you're going to expect me. I can't just
Yep.
sit around and wait for him to show up. Y'all gonna be like, Rashida, this happened. Rashida, this happened. I need help with this. Blah, 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 blah. The client did this. Someone talked to me crazy. I need to not come in on Tuesday. I'm literally not going to come to this meeting until our manager, who doesn't show up for weeks at a time to his meeting, shows up, because y'all not gonna get. And it's that way of like getting Black women to do the work, the uncredited work, right? That
Mhm.
like that gap that we're expected to fill and that man never, not a single time, said thank you. He would just not show up and not ask what happened, like it didn't exist. And then there's no one else in our line to speak to about it. Because the last time I did that, they were like, "That's your manager, girl. Deal with it." But you're
Well, see,
our
and to
boss.
your point, what's even credited work, right? I mean, like you make the what because, and that's the thing. I worked with some of the nicest people. I would get credit. I mean, what's credit mean? Is it a bonus?
Mhm.
Is it a thank you? Is it a feature at a town hall? An accolade? I got all that
Mm-mm.
stuff. That
No.
don't mean nothing either.
I don't even want. I'm literally just saying, if it's not in my job description, if I can identify whose job description it's in and it's not
Hmm.
me, I won't be doing it. Oh, that's his work. I'm not. I'm not stepping in. If you don't want to come to weekly meetings, he should cancel. You might always confuse me. Like, what does he think is happening when he doesn't show up to his weekly meeting?
Must be nice.
I was like, what do you actually think is going to happen when your employees have all left what they're doing to sit in a room, and we're sitting in a room waiting for you for an hour to show up, and you don't show up? What do you think you expect? You expect me to take over.
Hmm. Yes, like a good mammy. Yes, Amina, that's what I said. Because and ultimately that's it,
That's
right?
it.
Like
That's it.
I'm gonna take care of people.
That's it. That's it. And I have former coworkers who thank me for the way I took care of them when their actual managers didn't. But like,
Hmm.
who took care of me? Right? Like, who?
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
doing the additional work because our joint manager ain't doing nothing for you. But that leaves me floating with
Yep.
no protection, no care,
Yep.
no concern. And it's such a terrible place to be in when you're working
Yes.
and when you're overworking.
Yes.
The whole expected to be there early and leave late thing made me laugh, because when I first moved to San Francisco, all of my colleagues, all of the other lawyers in our legal department, um, were not in the Bay Area, and so they all worked from home. A Bay Area commute is easily my commute was 2 hours, and I asked my boss what hours. I said, like, what hours do you want me to work? You're in Ohio. I'm in San Francisco. Do you want me working your Ohio hours or San Francisco
Right.
hours? Let me know. Let me know. And she said, I want you to be there when the CEO of our smaller company comes in, and I want you to leave after he leaves. That man was getting there at 7 and leaving at 7, which means I would have to leave home at 5 a.m. and get home at 9 p.m. And you're working at your desk at home. I said, "Oh, baby." I tried
Mm.
it for like a week. I might have lasted 3 days in that week, and then I was like, there's absolutely no way. Y'all West Coast people, your East Coast people can pick up. One of you in Ohio, one of you in somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think Pittsburgh. You can pick up the slack. You can do the things that in the morning, I'll do some evening thing. No. But there was no thought to how the
It
structure
impacted
we
you.
create impacts you,
Mhm.
right? Like, and that's, I think, what challenges so many of us at work is that people are so managers and structures, corporations tend to be so concerned with the end product that there's very little concern for the people who are expected to create the end product. If I got to get up at
Right.
5 and I don't get home till 9, 5 days a week, how good is
Mhm.
my commute is not I sit in a back seat and a man drives me home, even though I'm
Right.
currently working for Uber. My commute is like multiple trains and buses into the dark night,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Like if you're not thinking about how the work you how the work you set up impact the people you're working for, like it's not in the real world, that is not America. It would not be a situation that would lead to longevity or success. But because America has made people so dependent through our healthcare situation and so many other things, so dependent on these jobs, even when they're treating us like hot garbage, it's very hard to it's very hard to say, oh, this isn't healthy, this is toxic, I deserve better, because where is better, right? Like you can say you deserve better.
Right.
You can say you deserve a
Right.
place that like isn't going to drive you into the hospital.
Mhm.
Child, I remember one time I left a meeting. I was so mad. I was so mad. I walked out of a meeting at work, walked 2 miles to the ferry building, turned around, walked a mile back. I was at the mall. I said, let me go to the movies because I'm not ready to go back to see them people. And I haven't even I haven't gone out. I just left the meeting. I don't remember what I was mad about. I told one of the people who worked for me, like, I don't know when I'll be back. I got in the movie and I'm like, I'm really uncomfortable in here. I left, got back in the office, looked in the mirror, eyes were flared. Eyes just flared.
Mm.
I'm uncomfortable in the movie because my anger has led to this autoimmune flare. And I've
Yep.
never, in my entire life, I've never been able to identify, like, oh, that's the thing, right? Usually
Mhm.
it's like, I'm tired, I'm not keeping my body in optimal care, right? But
Right.
that was the one time where I was like, I got that pissed. I got that angry that my body was like, oh, what is this intruder? Let's attack something. And
Yep.
it's crazy that like, not that I want my life to do that instead. Not that I want like the love in my life to do that, but like if anything is going to do that in my life, it shouldn't be work. Right? Work
Right.
shouldn't get me to the point of like I should show up, press a button, and leave. Right? Like
Work is for a paycheck.
I am so angry, so
Mhm.
angry that my body is starting to attack itself. That don't make
But
sense.
see, that's why, you look at, your lupuses, your MSs, these autoimmune diseases. You know, it is no accident that those diseases show up in Black and brown women, right?
Mhm.
Because it's every time you bite your tongue,
Every
every
time.
time you swallow that comment.
Mhm.
When I sat in that sales meeting and the chief marketing officer referred to me as a girl, and my mind was like, did he just it took like a full five, like it did not compute. He just referred to me as a girl. It's all the little small indignities, and you know
Mhm.
the and it's funny because when I had a really two really good friends up in Boston. We're still friends to this day. White women. We were peers. And I remember one day, basically, we're like, what? Kind of like challenging me on like, why aren't you in here like black women womaning on them, right? Like, why wasn't I going off on them? Maybe.
What would it matter?
Well, here's the thing. At the thing that they were asking about, I would have been tossing furniture daily.
Right.
I, I
It's
would have been. I would have been
I
tossing furniture daily.
I left a meeting once. I think I've told this here before. I left a meeting once with my team with external stakeholders. And there was a gay white male who worked for me. And he's one of those people who's like thoughtful about like women's issues, etc.
Mm.
I think as he tried to navigate his space in the world. And he looked at me and he said, they wouldn't talk to you like that if you weren't a Black woman. And I was like, oh, you're figuring, like you think you're telling me something. No, he said they wouldn't talk to you like that if you were a white man. They wouldn't talk to you like that if you were a white man. And I
Oh,
was like, well, baby, you think you're, oh no, like this is I'm deep in my career, baby. I know this. And he said it like it was this new like revelation. Like and it was for him. He never
for him.
realized like what was going on. He said they would never talk to you like that if you were a white man. And I was like, oh baby, I'm gonna let you sit with that for a while. Cause
Mhm,
absolutely. You're absolutely
mhm.
as a white man, you understand that like they're never gonna talk to you the way like that. They're never going to talk to you like
Yep.
that. They're talking to me crazy because I'm not.
Mhm.
And he said it like it was this new information. He had a revelatory moment, and I was like,
And the thing is, he had that moment, and as much in that moment, and even on an ongoing basis, like maybe at moments when things like that
mhm.
happen, where he may show up for you as an ally, that's great. But he doesn't have that sitting in front of him at every minute.
And he doesn't have any power to do anything about it. He works for me.
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
or we're parallel at this. I don't know. At some point, he worked for me. I don't know if he was working for me at that point. Um, he
And
didn't
let's
do
be clear
anything.
here too. Here's the other thing. These organizations, they supersede what individuals can do, to your point, right? The last job that I had, I worked with some really great people, really great individuals who would sit in meetings and we would try to make sure that we took the concerns of individuals and capacity and work-life balance into consideration. But we worked in a Fortune 500 company, baby. They, you know what I mean? So it's sort of like you're rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So try as you might, as the groups of people with the best of intentions, you're still working within a broken, dysfunctional system, which intends to milk you
Hmm.
for every ounce of energy, like you are literally just a cog in the machine and it doesn't
So
give a
it reminds me so much. So we are having a conversation this week about the empire, right? Like America as
mm,
empire, and a lot of the successful corporations that have sprung up within America do the same, very similar empire building of like getting all the resources, getting
mhm,
everything they can from the resources, and then like dumping whatever like does not serve them without paying attention to how they leave things behind, right? It's
right.
like mini empires inside of the big empire. And then they wonder why no one wants to work, right? Like, because
Well, and I
the last
oh,
job's
go ahead,
heavy,
sorry.
right? Like, so
Exactly.
talk to us.
AirPods. Sorry, my AirPods just were yelling at me. I thought they were gonna die. I think it's interesting. I think that the pandemic, again, it was that same sort of coalescing of forces
Mhm.
where I don't remember from the Matrix, was it the red pill or the blue pill that woke Neo up, right? Like I think that was the same way that I took that pill at that period of time, a lot of people did. Um and it was like I can't go back. I can't unsee it.
Mhm.
Um I just knew I needed to wait for that bonus. And girl, ooh, every day was a struggle. It was a struggle. It was a struggle. I had a countdown. Luckily, working with you and other women in Burnout to Bliss helped me because even though I had an exit plan, I had an exit strategy, I had my money lined up, I had my date. Because one thing, another thing Miss Rashida Dow likes besides being right is she likes you to have a date on your calendar. What is your freedom date? Because I should rewind. I started with a sabbatical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was my plan, ladies and gentlemen. I see Charles D. Um, uh, I started with a 3-month sabbatical, and we were on a call. It took maybe 1.5 of our monthly meetings for me to be like, "Yeah, I ain't going back. Never mind. How about I just quit?
How about you
Because
just
three
quit?
months is not gonna work."
You you're not gonna have lupus in 3 months? Like what are we doing? What's going on in 3 months? Okay, but also I think one of the important things that you did along the way was that you were able to, because of different forces within yourself and the company, you were able to take some time away. So you were out of the DC area, you came to Mexico and worked for Mexico City for a while, and you
Mhm,
did your scouting trip while working, and your office knew you were down here,
mhm.
and you
'Cause
probably
they knew I was on the brink.
did more play while you were here than you would have done if you were in DC.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. They knew I was on the brink. Like, they knew. They knew, I was like Miss Sophia rocking in the chair. They knew I was on the brink.
Mhm.
And so, it was kinda like, whatever you want. Whatever you wanna go work in Mexico City for 6 weeks? Great. Um, and it was during that time, I got my residency. Um, I did work while I was here, but I got out and about, and, yeah, it was just nice to have, because it was just nice to have a break away from the house.
Mhm.
Because at that point, we had been in lockdown. And then, so for me, working from home plus having lupus, I wasn't really out in the streets. Although in the end, wound up having COVID a couple of times, being really sick one of those times. And that was the other thing. It was like, life is short. My mother passed away from breast cancer at 61. I was 51. I'm like, if I die, can I curse?
Yeah.
If I die in my home office of a heart attack after wrapping up a conference call like a jackass,
Aren't you the dummy?
aren't I
Aren't
the
you the
dummy?
aren't you the big dummy? And
I,
not
you
that
know,
it's
so
it's not that it's people who happens to were dumb. It's that like you had all the signs.
I
You had
had
all the signs.
I had all the signs, and as my mother was making her decline, she had a really aggressive form of inflammatory breast cancer. Um, she very much believed that her cancer was brought about by suppressing,
Mhm.
her wants and her needs. She was the middle child, right? She was the one trying to smooth stuff out
Mhm.
in the family. Um, she always felt that. And, so for me, part of this was like, I felt like, she would have been very proud of me for having made this conscious decision for myself. Um, I don't know what I was talking about. I lost my train of thought. That's probably a good place for you to make me pause and ask a question
So it's
because I
funny.
run
So
my
talking
mouth a
about
lot.
like the suppression of feelings and how that like leads to um so much within ourselves and those autoimmune issues, whatever. It clickety clacked for me that like my first autoimmune issue kicked in when I was 18.
Really?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
was going on? Oh, I mean, it,
I
but it was
it
something stressful.
I mean it was my it I'm gonna say first one was 18, second one was 22, probably. It wasn't it wasn't a this thing happened and now I have something. It was 18 years right? It was,
Mm,
that's what I'm saying. It was 18 years of life, of like suppressed, of like having to suppress specific things that like,
okay.
yeah, I was like, what's going on? I'm going to a doctor, something's going on in my body. And they were like, oh, well, girl, good luck for the rest of your life. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, and so like Adelia said earlier that it's not just biting your tongue at work that'll make you sick, but yeah, in the house too. A lot of us
Oh,
are biting our tongue in our house. A lot of us are putting our families in situations where they can't express what they need to. Um,
mhm.
and so it comes how it comes, right? Your body reacts how it reacts. Um,
Well, and and to your point, and Adelia's point, that was, I didn't really touch on the family thing. Like I said, I don't have children myself, but as a child, my mother was a single parent. She worked multiple jobs. Um, I was the child. My mother needed me not to need her so much,
mhm.
because my sister growing up was the younger one, and I got the message that she was the sensitive one, and I needed to be strong for her. And so I was very out of touch and probably still getting in touch with what do I actually need? What do
What do
I
I,
actually want?
what am I actually feeling? What do I need? And
Oh,
how do I express?
feeling?
How,
Who wants
how
feelings?
do I express my needs in a way that people will hear and care? Because
Mhm.
expressing your needs and not having people around you who are open to hearing what you need or caring about what you need is almost worse. It's worse, I think, than not expressing it at all. I'd rather just not say nothing. And that is part of like that 18 years. It's like not saying anything because the needs aren't getting addressed by the people who should be addressing them, right?
Well, I wonder how many people in this chat are the people who your family would refer to as, oh, they're going to be all right. You don't ever have to worry about them. My mother died. I had family members that would call me to see how my sister was doing.
My dad used to call me to find out how the rest of the family was doing. And then, like, 20 minutes into the call, he'd be like, so what's going on with you? You just ran through. I just, after a while, I just stopped answering the phone because no. So I lived in a house. When I was in college for a while. My mom and I lived together. Her phone would ring first, and if she wasn't home to answer it, my phone would ring. And then I'll pick up the phone. He'll see how my mom was doing. He'll see how my sister was doing, and then eventually he'd get around to, okay, so what's going on with you? And then it'd be over. And so I was like, after enough of those ring, because we had two different lines, I'd be like, this man isn't even calling to speak to me.
Mhm.
He don't like he's not, I'm the second choice. And so what if when her phone rings, then my phone rings? I just don't answer.
Mhm. Yep.
Because having needs that you can't express because you're not supported in any way by anybody.
Mhm.
It's almost like not having needs. And so I see so many people saying that like that's them.
Yep.
And one of the things I
Mhm.
talk about in my coaching program often is that it's the, you said middle daughter, and I refer to it generally as I most of the women in my program are the responsible daughter. I'm not the oldest child. I am the youngest, but I am the responsible daughter. And that's how I end
Mhm.
up. Because it's like I said, my autoimmune issue kicked in at 18. It's not work that did
Mhm.
that to me. My shit
Yep.
kicked in early.
Mhm.
The responsible daughters are the ones who've been carrying the weight their entire life and need an effing break. Those are the ones that show up like, I'm burnt out. How do I take a sabbatical? I want to take a sabbatical, but I'm taking care of my parents. I'd be like, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And they'd be like, oh, I have four. But they will, of course, because you're the responsible child. You've been the responsible child your whole life, and no one else is stepping up. What are we gonna do for you? Right? Like, how do we adjust something? The responsible child, the
Mhm.
responsible daughter is the one who
Especially.
ends the situation all the time. It's the
Exactly.
one
Because
who has to do the work. in the family, outside of the family, and there's often very little credit or acknowledgement of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think on some level, um, there's probably a lot of things that played into this. Um, I had a I had a lot of resentment, right? Like, what I in those like angsty teenage years, like those early teenage years, I had a lot of resentment. My mother used to call me Evil Knievel, and I couldn't figure out what it was.
Mhm.
And it was the resentment of and I guess even as I think about it now, maybe this is therapy, Sheeta. As I think about it now, I guess I was doing emotional labor
Mhm.
then.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I was carrying my own emotions because I knew she didn't have room to carry them, right? Because she was left in a situation with these two kids by herself, having to, keep a roof over our head and, all the stuff that came along with that. And I had a wonderful childhood, but um again, I was always described, I was a little steel magnolia. I was always going to be all right. I was a child.
I was a child with no space for feelings or needs.
Hmm.
Figure it the fuck out on your own.
Hmm.
And like we see that show up in work, right? We see like that's not a thing that stops. It's not a thing once we've been trained in our childhood that we are not allowed to have feelings or needs. You see it, you see it reflect your whole life until you can say, like, I'm I'm allowed to express how I feel. I'm allowed to express what I need and hope that someone's gonna listen.
Well, and if you think about it too, um, as I'm kind of putting puzzle pieces together here now, not that I haven't really kind of thought about this before, but even that thing of, the thing I enjoyed at work was being able to sort of help people, kind of bring that humanistic side, well, whether it was people who worked for me or indirectly with me,
Mhm.
being able to sort of step in and help them and advocate on their behalf, celebrate their wins, get them visibility. Doing the same shit when I was a kid,
Mhm.
you know,
Being like
and
that
I was
that
good at it.
emotional manager, right? And so that was my role in my family as well, is like, child is apparently therapy on both ends. Like they the one who has to be there to remind people of birthdays, right? The one who has to do all
Hmm.
the work. And then the one, if you're doing all of that work, how are what happens when it's your birthday? What happens when it's your special day? What happens because
Nothing.
there's no one doing that work for you. And people who don't see the work being done don't acknowledge what you're doing and don't understand why you would feel a way. Uh, I stopped celebrating. I don't think I've ever said this publicly. I stopped celebrating birthdays in my family years ago because my birthdays were always every single time got the short straw every single time. And there was a time where my mom, my dad, my sister, and I all had big birthdays within like 3 years of each other. And every single person either went all out or was given the opportunity to go all out. And when my birthday came, crickets. And I was like, oh,
That's
okay.
what
So
we
I'm
doing.
participating. I won't like if this is what it means in my family to like always be the one who's carrying the ball with no one to pass it to, clocking the fuck out. All right. And
Hmm.
that's also what I have to do at work. What I had to do at work was realize that like I might carry that ball for a while, but when I don't see it reciprocated,
Right.
when I realize that there's no one, like I'll try to do the work. Like with my first manager when I worked in San Francisco, I went to her boss and I was like, let me tell you how she just screwed us all by giving no one a review. If we don't get a review, we can't get a bonus, we can't get a raise. Like none of us in our whole department. And he was like, oh. And so he made her do a review, and she gave us all, every single one of us, average on every
What's
single
the
thing.
average?
And I was like, you gonna let, like, this is, I'm doing half of her work to begin with. And he was like, well, she did her reviews. There was nothing I could do. And I was like, oh, well, from now on, I realize that you don't care about us in a way that is going to allow me to, like, I've told you how I feel, right? I've told you what I
Right.
need. I need a boss who's active in this role. And you're like, she did the least. So okay, bye. I was like, oh, I'm not allowed to feel and care here. I'm not allowed to feel things. I'm not allowed to need things here. You've told me that. And now I start setting up boundaries. And that's just how it goes. Right.
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting being on the other side, right? Because here I am, I'm a year and a half into this. Um, and it's interesting. It looks a little bit different than how I thought it would look. Um, spend a lot of time doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I and sort of and by myself, but I don't feel lonely. Like I enjoy it. It almost feels like cocooning in a way. And I think about it and I'm thinking it's making me I'm wondering about it given our conversation, right? Like the fact that, obviously as a kid, I was always sort of trying to scan and figure out like what's needed here, right? Like what role do I play here? How do I help this situation out? And at work, it was always the same. And so, if I think about maybe all the years combined of sort of being hyper vigilant and trying to figure out where to plug in and fill gaps, yeah, I'm probably going to want to sit on my butt for a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
and listen to podcasts and play and paint. Um, and so it's sort of like I'm either just maximum relaxation or I've done a fair amount of traveling. I've definitely done some fun things, um and I haven't looked at it with any sort of really real judgment, um because even though I know people like you don't believe me when I say that I'm an extrovert introvert, I am
Child.
enjoying be quiet. I am enjoying my time by myself and just really just and the only thing I'm curious about, I'm wondering if this is a phase or how it's going to evolve over
Mhm.
time. But like I've been tired, tired to the marrow of my bones for years. And I think emotional, sort of psychic tiredness
Mhm.
is more draining than physical tiredness. And so I
Yeah.
think that's what I'm sort of making up for.
And it's a really, let's shift to the more positive thing here, which is
Hmm.
you've done a really good job of crafting a retirement even before you knew it was a retirement. Even which is where we started. Even before you knew it was a retirement, you did a really good job of crafting a retirement that looks and is joyful and playful and gets you tapped into the things that you like. Okay, so Dara, let me tell you real quick. Dara says she an introvert, but she's never met a stranger. Listen, okay, so this is the thing. This is the thing. If you and I get on are on a bus together, Dara gonna find someone to talk to, and she gonna talk to them in Spanish for 20 minutes, and I'm gonna be like,
Maybe, maybe it depends on which mood I'm in.
okay, okay, okay. So Dara, in her retirement, she's been on multiple sailing trips. Been at least two, right?
Uh,
In the year and a half.
I've only been on one, which makes me sad.
So you went on, but when you went on one right before you retired, or before, in
No,
time for that thing?
I've been on one since I've been here. Like before, and it's interesting because even the sailing trips have changed. That used to be the thing that sustained me. I started sailing, and uh, I would go once a year for a week. We would charter a boat, sail it ourselves, sleep on the boat. It was just sleeping on the boat, the water. The last time I went was when I first moved here,
Mhm.
um, and it was a different experience because I didn't need it as much,
Okay.
if that
Um,
makes any sense.
okay. So
So, but again, it's very situational. Who's somebody here said it? Nichelle Gaynor. Thank you, my sister. That's it exactly. Extrovert, introvert. I can be extroverted around people I want to talk to, but I'm an introvert in the sense that like I love my. That's because I like y'all.
no, it's not. It's not. She be in the streets talking to people. And like you'll be going to meet her somewhere, and she's talking to someone. You'd be like, "Where'd you meet this? Like, how'd you?" Oh, I was just walking down the street, and they said so, and I asked them about their shoes. Okay, girl, stranger. You don't have stranger danger. That's it for you. You don't have no stranger danger. Not here.
I do. Girl, I'm from West Philly. I do. So I think the thing too is I'm a extroverted introvert who is very outgoing. That's interesting. That's what it
I
is.
don't listen. The outgoing and the introvert don't go together. They just don't.
They
They just don't.
do.
Okay.
Now where
All
you
right.
get your energy from?
Anyhow, anyhow, we gonna
Thank
talk
you,
about it.
Courtney.
So Dara is an artist. She paints. Work by Dara Herring. And then behind her as well, she she's been taking ceramics classes without me. You've been sailing. You've been living life in Mexico. You've been like creating this like play space that
Hmm.
I would say probably gives you some energy.
It does. It does. Yeah, I at this point I just like I said, that phase after I lost the job in Boston, I was unemployed and kind of dealing with being sick, and I started painting. I have friends of mine that I've known from like high school. They're like, when did you start, painting? And like, I've never done anything. So I always say I have new eyes. And so, museums and art galleries, I literally will just play. I'm looking at the mess of my two desks and all the stuff that's laid out here, just playing in paint and getting um, my hands dirty every day. So whether it is ceramics and it's too far for you, so don't even try it. That's why I didn't go. But whether it's ceramics, I should have been drinking out of a mug that I made. But whether it's ceramics, sewing, painting, and all kinds of mixed media work, crochet. And one of the things that's happened is I've had folks, I have a Instagram page. I've had folks that have reached out to me about buying some of my work. And at this point, I just sold another painting. So I was like, okay, I guess it's time for me to like own it. So I just officially changed my Instagram page from personal to professional, which was really more of a symbolic thing for me than anything, because it's how do I turn this thing that I love into something that can help generate income for me and not have it feel like work, because to me work has had this dirty connotation. Oh yeah, we're doing surf camp later this year. um uh but uh it's been like an interesting little adventure, and I've found myself doing as little and as much as I want to do, and very often little. It's very
How
little.
how did you figure out how you wanted to spend this time in retirement?
Um, I don't know that I intentionally came up with a plan. I think I just sort of well, let me stop. The one way in which I intentionally. I when like the first apartment, I got a 3-bedroom because I said I'm gonna have an art studio.
Mhm.
So that's there was definitely intention there. Um, that was probably the biggest thing that I focused on,
Okay.
was making sure that I had space to play, um, and not having barriers to that. The other thing was to work very hard at, um, doing what I wanna do, when I wanna do it, right?
What does that
So,
look like for you?
it means I'm usually up till 2 o'clock in the morning,
Oof.
and I so, and I get up around, 10, and
Mm.
I keep my phone on do not disturb for about 2.5 hours till my mind's right. I take the dog out around 10, come back in, we both get back in the bed. She gets in her bed, I get in mine. And I usually journal and I read, I watch, usually have a podcast or a YouTube video going, and it's just slow and easy. I used to have this little morning routine that I had that really sort of sustained me through work. Now, half my day, I just sort of like revel in that morning routine,
Okay.
with journaling and reading and just, and often just kinda staying in bed, till hunger drives me out.
Okay. Um, what made Mexico City the right place for you in this time of your life?
Mexico City was the right place for me now because, the number one thing was the number of museums and galleries
Okay.
that are there for, at my disposal, and I haven't even hit them all. But even besides that, the fact that there's so much going on, I suspected that I was gonna spend a lot of time by myself and to myself, because again, the thing that makes me happiest right now is playing and paint, and that's in my house by myself, right? Um, but something said, because I've had some bouts of depression in my past, I didn't wanna be in a place where there wasn't something potentially pulling me out of being in the house.
Okay.
Because right now, sometimes I feel like my routine, I'm like, somebody might look at that and say, "Child, are you depressed?" I'm not. I'm extremely happy and I'm relaxed. But I still have the pull of the city. I have the pulse of the city and the energy level of the city, that if I need to, get out the house or do some things or be around some people, that I can do that. And I was just afraid that being in like a small little town somewhere just wouldn't be good for me. Plus, I don't want to be hot and humid all day long. Just beach all day felt like it would be boring for me right now. I needed something with a little bit more energy, but we'll see what the future holds.
Okay. So, art, things going on outside, amazing
Mhm.
weather.
Yes, yes. It's been a little interesting of late, but I love being able to get up in the morning. I mean, it's August. I
Mhm.
get up in the morning, I have on my sweatpants and my little windbreaker, and I take the dog out. And I'm not hot, I'm not cold, it's just right.
Mm.
And, our rainy season has been pushed back, so it still rains, pretty much every day. But I kind of see it coming, grab the dog, run outside, take her out, because neither one of us likes to get wet. And it's overall it's pleasant. The trade-off is we get pollution, so there's a level of pollution just with the number of people that are in the city. But yeah, I don't know where else I could go environmentally to get the kind of weather that I think is going to not make me miserable. Oh man, my AirPods just died. I think I gotta go to my
Try it
And you
with
still
just a speaker. Yeah, try it with just a speaker. See how that works.
yeah, I don't know.
Oh no, you muted yourself. So check unmute yourself. Okay, nice to see.
You can hear me?
Hello? Yeah.
Okay.
You guys let me know if Dara doesn't sound good, but I think to me you sound great.
Okay. Yeah, so
All
I
right.
don't know where the next place might be, but it can't be too hot. And who knows, maybe in the future I'll be I'll bounce around a little bit more. But for right now, I wanted to, have my place, my cozy couch and, my things on the wall and just be able to cocoon, really, I think is the best term for it.
Okay. Could you see yourself living back in America?
Never.
Why?
Um, it's interesting. For my own mental health, I checked out of the US media with OJ Simpson. This is
Mm,
so randomly specific.
a while ago. Yes.
Yeah. My aunt worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer. I was at the newsroom. She was the night editor working on my resume when OJ Simpson was in the Bronco. And, they had a bank of televisions on the wall. And it was news reports from all over the country. And they literally, each news station, they were just making stuff up about what had happened, right? Because they didn't know. And I think that was like sort of the very first of the 24-hour news cycle. And I sat there in that newsroom and just watched it all, like the place where the news emanates from. They could put that man on trial tomorrow. I could be in the jury because I never paid any attention to any of it. And and then of course it just got increasingly negative and it just wasn't good for me mentally. Being outside of the US, I try not to watch the news or anything like that, but what it has given me time to do is to learn more about other countries, geopolitical history. I am no picky girl, but I know a lot more than I once did, even about, things that are happening historically where, why the Gaza Strip is where it is today. And when I look at the role that the US has played in things, it's sort of like you take a step back and you're outside looking in. Hot garbage, baby. Hot garbage. And, I worked in healthcare,
Mhm.
medical devices, a lot of different things, but health insurance specifically over on and off over the years. Um, and it's just, the more you know, the more you know. Knock wood, I have no intent. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I cannot see myself moving back to the US. There is I don't have physical responsibility at this point in my life for anyone. I don't know what the future holds. If something changes, who knows? But I don't have an intention on going back there.
So you've attended an Exodus summit, right?
Mhm. Yep,
Do
couple.
you remember what years you attended?
Uh, the only one I didn't attend. Did I attend last year? I think I've attended all of them. So last year,
Mhm.
oh, I can't stand that thing. I thought they stopped doing that. So maybe has been 2 or 3.
Okay, so maybe not the first year. So we're on year 5 now. So I have to like look back. So the first year, 2020, we had like
Mhm.
50 speakers.
No, I did not attend that one. I don't think I attended the first 2,
Next
but
year
I
was
think
homecoming.
I didn't attend that one.
Okay, and then it was about making money.
That's where I started.
Okay.
Yes.
And then last year was kind of a continuation of kind of a more general sabbatical. We
Mhm.
brought to, our theme was freedom. This year,
Yes.
we're talking about moving abroad quickly, especially for people who want to get out before the election, before
Mhm.
the inauguration. Because as someone who lives in DC and someone who was at least emotionally impacted by the things happening at the Capitol, you know that like it's challenging and it's likely to repeat itself, right?
It is, and, I don't wanna turn this into a whole political discussion, but, it's
Mhm.
interesting because as I turn it into a political discussion, um, but when, the discussion came up about Kamala running first, I was invited to that call. Some of my friends sent me the link or whatever. I was like, "I'm so how many times do we have to come to the rescue?" And then, afterwards, one of my friends was just like, "Yeah, I was a little disappointed in the call." She didn't know it was gonna lend itself towards fundraising in the end. Um, but it's interesting because this is right now, this time we're in is reminding me of when Obama was running. This was right before my mom died, and she loved Obama. She followed his career, and she said, I remember she said, "I love him, but we're not ready for him yet." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "If he gets elected president," she's like, "I don't know when the time is going to be." She said, "But we're not ready for him yet. If he gets elected, we're going to see a backlash like you would never expect." And I'm starting to I'm starting to wonder, when and hope is not a bad thing.
Mm-mm.
Hope is not a bad thing. But I'm hoping that it's tempered hope, that it's reasonable hope, that because again, even like we talked about in the workplace, we're talking about somebody coming into an institution, y- you know, as much as other people want to turn this into a dictatorship, there are still, levels of the government that, have to be worked through
Yes.
and with.
And no matter who wins, you're still in America. It's still an empire. It's still main focus
Money,
is
money, money,
is
money.
the empire and empire building is the
Mhm.
main focus and will always be as long as it's in its current form. And so like, yeah, I hope she wins. It's still America, right? Like
Mhm.
Obama being president didn't change the country in a way that impact positively in a way that impacted me when I lived there, right? Like, good for him, right? Good that there's representation. Good that like some people who are less aligned with the way I think aren't in office, but it's still an empire that is set on protecting itself and in some senses destroying other people. So
Very much so. And I think that's the thing now. I have the time and the bandwidth to sort of watch and read things that are less sensationalized and more sort of historical focused, more critical. Um, and it's kind of just like you see the pieces a bit more as they're playing from the outside looking in. And I'm just like, ooh, um, even just the basics of, you mentioned it earlier, and me coming from a health insurance background, the healthcare industry in the US will never change. It will never, ever, ever change. Obama tried. It will never change because there's too much money being made, A,
and given.
and health insurance being provided by your employer is too much of a carrot and a stick. There's no incentive
Mhm.
for it to change, for the powers that be. And I think one of the things that has really become clear in the Trump years, the powers that be no longer hide in the shadows in terms of what their agenda is.
Mhm.
And they really have done a great job of getting those of us who aren't one percenters or even 10 percenters to fight amongst ourselves rather than focusing on the wealth that they are accumulating. So, all right, that's enough said. But no, I will not be moving back to the US. No place is perfect, but
No,
no.
no. If you're thinking about leaving the US, you want to be at Exodus Summit this year. We are, because our focus this year is not just leaving, but like speeding up your process as quickly as possible, right? Like whatever things you can do in October, November, December, so that when January comes, when February comes, you're ready to get out. Because I want all people to live in countries that allow them to thrive and allow them to live the best life imaginable. But your imagination for what is the best life is really, really stunted in the US. We have for so long, we have had so many things beaten into us for so long that it's moving abroad and spending a lot of time abroad that really allows you to realize that, like, oh, them roads are not paved in gold. Like, wait a minute now, right?
Mhm.
Like, ew. And so, not that I want anything bad to happen to America, but what I do want is that the people who want to get out because they don't think that's where their future is, because they want more than what they're able to get within the empire, I want them to go find their happiness wherever it is, right? And so that's what we're doing this year at Exodus Summit. And you can find more information at exodussummit.com. At least you can get on our wait list at exodussummit.com.
Yeah. And you know, Sheeta, it's interesting too, because the fact of the matter is getting out, leaving the US isn't the answer for everybody.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
do think that from a sense of self-preservation, it's important to at least consider it.
Mhm.
I think an exit strategy, an alternative is important. I'm not going to go so far as to say imperative, but at least to be able to leave that trap you just talked about,
Mhm.
right? Like the messaging, you know, take the blue pill, the red pill. I have to figure out which one it is, right? So even if you don't leave physically, leave emotionally, leave
Right.
psychically, right?
Mhm.
Do work in your own best interest. Um, and you know, that was not something that I was able to accomplish there. And that was what I decided. I was like, look, you know, my job, they'd hired a professional mentor for me and all this other kind of stuff. And I was just like, okay, how about you know, if I'm the common denominator in all of these jobs that I've had, all these places I've lived, right,
Mhm.
where the burnout keeps happening and all of that. If I'm the common denominator, why don't I remove the common denominator?
Right.
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 And, you know, so now I am, I don't know, maybe to sort of take it full circle, I am going back to that little kid who tried her best to act like she was a grown up. And I'm playing in paint.
Yeah.
And I'm just figuring out how to play again with no
So,
judgment.
and that's very important. It's very important. And it's like, it's not an opportunity that everyone gets. So I'm glad that now that you know you have the opportunity, you're kind of seizing it.
Mhm.
I guess one of my follow-up questions for you would be the way, have you felt yourself healing post retirement, post stopping work?
I have. It's interesting though. Because like, you know, even this past week or so, I've been dealing with the lupus flare, and this is the first significant one that I've had since I moved. And it's interesting having one when I'm not in that rush situation, fight or flight that I was in on a daily basis of, oh, Dara, fire drill, fire drill. I don't know how I did it. I have no idea how I did it. I really don't. So, what is it? Wherever you go, there you are. Right. So you take those things with you. But now I have the luxury of resting and not having any obligations. And I think maybe one of the reasons this flare has come up too is, I've had, friends that have reached out. One of my friends reached out to me last night, wanted to have dinner. And I used to feel really bad saying, I can't go out. I'm, not feeling well. I'm really tired or whatever. Because that's probably one of the ongoing things that I have is I have a lot of fatigue. And I used to feel bad about that in a way. Maybe it made me feel a little like I was a little pitiful. I don't know what it was. But now it is what it is. And I just say what it is. And if for you as a person, if we're, friends, friendly, acquaintances, it bothers you that I'm not able to go out and do things, it is what it is. I think it's hard for people though, because when I am on, I'm on. But when I'm off, baby, I'm on. Somebody said it. I can be on do not disturb for a week.
So I think it's interesting because you have lupus. Like anyone who understands even the most basic thing about lupus would understand that, like, when you're tired, you're tired. And so I wonder if you're being harder on yourself than any of your friends would be.
Oh, A, yes, because I do that. But B, there's also something psychological about it. Lupus, not so much MS. It's a very much an invisible disease. Like chronic, fatigue syndrome. I can be 100% fine, and then when I say I'm exhausted, what does that mean for people? It is sometimes hard, I think, for people to process what that means, because I don't have a different set of words than what you might use when you're exhausted, so I do try to give people grace in that. And I've had conversations with folks about it, like to say, hey, listen, when I say this, that's when I really mean, because there aren't different terms. It's almost like the way, like if anybody has dealt with like real clinical depression, right? Like real, versus people, oh, I feel really depressed today. We're using the same word to describe very different experiences. So I do give people grace in that. There's a concept for anybody on the call in the chat who might also deal with like an autoimmune disease or an invisible condition. They call it spoon theory. So like if you're not dealing with any kind of chronic condition or illness or whatever, you might have unlimited spoons, and think about spoons as like units of energy. But
yes.
But like I might only have 5 spoons for a day. If I take a shower on a given day, that might be a spoon and a half. So all I got left for the rest of that day is the balance of that, right?
Right.
And then, you know, so I had to create for myself, you know, I order out a lot more than other people, which again, from the beginning for me felt silly, right? Because I'm not working anymore. Why am I ordering? Because I'm tired. And I am going to have to clean up the kitchen. I have to do the prep. Here I got to soak the vegetables first, right? So there's that little extra step. So so I give people grace. I think I am still learning to give myself the same grace that I sometimes give others.
It sounds, willing to be wrong about this. It sounds like there's the boundary setting that you kind of struggled with before about work. It sounds like that might be coming into play here too, where like the idea of like putting yourself first, right? Putting yourself in what you need for, and being able to say like, it's a no today and it's just like a no, right? Without having to explain it or having to like, maybe not to other people, but to yourself.
Maybe a little bit, but I nowhere near as much. I mean, it's probably, I think it's less about boundary setting than it's about like, yeah, I'd like to go out and get something to eat. But what's better for me would be, right? It's less of the worrying about what other people think and making the trade-offs for that, making the trade-offs in terms of what's better for me physically,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that said, I had problems with boundaries for 50 years. A year and a half is not going to, you know, and I guess I bring this up to say, like, there's no magic that occurs the day you quit, right? I would say the first 3 months, I was up every morning making my coffee. I was in the studio. It was just magic. And then at like month 4, I started waking up having panic attacks. And my brain, I think I was so addicted to being stressed, I could feel my brain trying to find something to worry about. And there was nothing, but I was used to that physical reaction. So I think that's probably one of the things that I would caution is whether a sabbatical or you're retiring early or you're retiring on time is just to allow for there to be changes and ebbs and flows in the experience.
Okay. Do you think your healing journey, your creative journey, your sailing experiences, which we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about today, do you have an idea of how that might look different than if you were still in DC? So if you were retired in DC, do you have an idea of what your life might have looked like?
No. And I mean, the truth of the matter is, you know, before I turned on a dime. I went from being the person who was like, I don't think I'm ever going to retire. Not because of money, but because it was like, why not work, right? You know, I got 6 weeks of vacation. I got, you know, whatever. It wasn't the environment there to me didn't feel like retirement. Wasn't conducive of retirement. I can't imagine what retirement would look like there. I feel like there would still be just remember Ghostbusters, the first one with the sludge that ran underground? Like it's that. I don't feel like my cortisol levels would have come down much being there. At all. So I honestly can't imagine. I think I would have had to go somewhere else. I probably would have moved back to Arizona. I used to live in Phoenix. So I probably would have moved back there.
Okay.
If I were to have retired in the States, I probably would have gone back to Arizona.
Do you think you would have retired if you weren't planning on moving to Mexico? Like what was the driving decision, I guess, is my question.
it was that all of those things coming together, the pandemic, George Floyd, the stress at my job, it was all of those things coming together that just sort of woke me up,
Mhm.
right? And was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like, this is the only life I have. Is this how I'm going to do this thing? Like, is this it? Is this how I die? And again, because remember, I was the person who didn't watch the news. And during the pandemic, yeah, I think everybody's watching the news, including me. And I'm watching the bodies being carried out of the hospital in New York. And it's just that moment of like, is this it? Like, am I the character? Am I this character who is this the way my life ends in this dystopian novel?
Okay.
And it's as simple as that. I have a friend coming to visit me in a couple of weeks who I had the conversation with her about just work. I was like, oh, I'll just work till I die, blah, blah, blah. And then the next time we talked, I was living in Mexico. She was like, excuse me? So she's
Mhm.
coming to visit next, in 2 weeks. Cause she was just like, I'm sorry, we need to talk. What happened? Because it was literally a turn on a dime.
Okay.
And the other thing is the money. I did all the things you're supposed to do. And I was like, who am I saving all this money for? I also stumbled across the book Die with Zero. And I didn't read the book first. I actually listened to the guy on a podcast. I missed a meeting. I was in the shower, ADHD. And I'm listening to the podcast, missed a meeting because I was just like, the book was telling me all the things. And, he made the point. I don't know if he said in the book, but he made the point. He was like, do you want to be the one who dies with $2.5 million in the bank in your 401k? You're the jackass. Now, if you have a family, set aside money for your family or whatever, but like, what are you putting the money away for? And you have to think about time versus money. And we've been programmed to believe, okay, I'll save up all this money. And once I retire, then I'll do all these things. Baby, you might be broken down and unable to do much of anything.
It's a conversation I have with people I work with frequently, and it's not that like you might have heard Dara say 2.5 million, and you're like, oh, that's crazy. I could never get there.
Yeah, just make it up a number.
Right. But like, if you have enough to live a comfortable, and it's usually less than you think, to live a comfortable life somewhere else, who are you saving the money for? And a lot of people will, and like, I do not have kids, so I have a luxury there, I understand. But a lot of people will say they're saving it for their kids. And I'm like, do your kids, like, I've had this conversation recently with someone who was on the edge, stressed, burned out, physically not doing well. I'm like, do your kids want the money or do they want you alive? Right? Because like at a certain point, you're trading days off your life for earning more money. And if it's more money than you need, right? Maybe to supplement your pension or social security or whatever you're going to get in retirement. If it's more money than you need for that, like if your plan isn't to die with zero, you're shortening your life. You're trading days of your life so that your children may have money, and that may not be what your children want.
Right. And as somebody who doesn't have children, I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. I had this conversation with my niece, who is my beneficiary. And I was like, look, baby, I'm about to blow all this money that you were going to get if something were to happen to me. I said, but why don't we do this? We'll spend it together and have some fun while I'm here. And she was like, I would rather do that any day of the week, because tomorrow's not promised. And there's a balance between being responsible, because we know how to be responsible. Okay. There's a balance between being responsible and not enjoying your life. you know, and everybody's sweet spot looks a little bit different. But I realized that, you know, I spent a lot of money. Ooh, child. I spent a lot of money trying to make myself feel better about the way that I made that money.
Mm-hmm.
Had some really nice cards, took some wonderful vacations. I was more of a experiences person than a things person. Um, but maxed out my 401k every year. And so when I look at that amount of money now that I am like, oh, I'm not going to be back in the US, I'm good. I'm good. Now, I'm not going to live the way that I'm not going to flow the way that I used to always flow, you know, back in the day. I'm gonna flow a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd much rather this. It wasn't worth it, Miss
Mm-mm.
Seal. It wasn't worth it.
It's hard to kind of come to that realization, but like no longer working in corporate America has added years to my life. My number of autoimmune flares I get each year are significantly lower than they were before, right?
Mhm.
I can go months without it happening. I can go months without being angry. Because what? I only talk to people I want to talk to. What would I be mad about?
Mhm.
The the taco lady wasn't in her spot today. Like, I'll be all right. There's another one down the block, right? Like I've made a lot of times our work becomes like the high stakes thing in our life. And if you can get away from that one way or another, whether that's through like retiring maybe a few years early or something else, you're adding years to your life and you're probably not trading off that much, right? Like we spend we spend a lot of money. I don't I spent a lot of money to cope with doing work or working in situations that were toxic. I spent a lot of money on that. And not having to do that anymore reduces the amount of money I spend living in a place that is slightly, slightly more,
Slightly.
slightly more affordable.
Mhm.
Helps with that as well. And knowing that like the world is my oyster, right? And not having to feel like I have to do it in this place or that place gives me the ability to say, what do I want my days to look like? And I think that's really important for all of us to consider. What do you want your days to look like? And where can you get that? Right? Like I like looking out and seeing the mountains. I don't want to see I want to I seeing the water would be great, but not if it's humid, right?
Mm.
Like I would rather I'll pass. I'll
Well,
pass.
and Sheila, you mentioned the sailing thing. So, and I'm thinking about it in terms of this discussion about choice. Um, Sailing was like I would like, and I took a lot of vacations. You know, that
Mhm.
was the one thing. I took more than my vacation time. So I would take like 7, 8 weeks of vacation a year.
Mhm.
Um, but the sailing trip was the one because, you know, just being on the water, sleeping on the water, and, you know, it was sort of learning how to, you know, work the sails, and, you know, we cooked for ourselves. It's just the best thing ever. And there's a Black Boaters Association in the US. So I got connected with them. You know, and there's nothing like sailing through, I don't know, I'm trying to some of the places we've been, well, even like the Virgin Islands, and we'd have a flotilla of like 15 catamarans of all Black people, and we pull up to an island and the yacht club there, and all the white people are like, yes, we here. But anyway, that was one of the things that I really lived for every year. And the one that I went on last year was very different for me. I didn't need it as much, right? It wasn't
Mhm.
my lifeline. So what I realized was that I'm not taking any old sailing trip. This was a boat that I was on where I didn't know all the people that were on this particular boat. And some of them I didn't care for. They weren't my favorite people. So it didn't make the trip as enjoyable as it had been. So now I've said, I'm only going on sailing trips where the boat has to be filled with my people, because
Mhm.
otherwise I'm not going, because I don't need it.
You don't need it. You don't
Not
need
in
it.
that way.
It's not the tool that it used to be.
It isn't. It isn't. And then of course, this year was first world problems, because I was somewhere else. They did the Greek Isles. It killed me. I don't know where I was, but I couldn't do both.
But you
So
weren't in the Greek Isles with them.
I was not, but I was doing something else. Obviously fabulous, but probably not as fabulous as sailing through the Greek Isles. But I'll get them on the next one.
Okay. So what's one thing, if someone has listened to our entire conversation today, what's one thing you want them to leave this conversation knowing, feeling secure about knowing?
Mhm. That you'll always do better betting on yourself. I don't know if that sounds like it's coming out of left field.
No.
Um, yeah, just bet on yourself.
And like betting on yourself really means like walking through the fear, because the fear is going to be there, right?
Mhm.
The fear of like, what if I need more money than I thought I needed? I should work 5 more years. The fear of, what about this new city? I might not make friends or might not like it, or all those other things. There's, no matter what you're going to do, the fear is there. But like, I have never regretted leaving a work experience ever in my life. I've never regretted leaving a relationship experience in my, like, betting on myself and knowing that if I feel like there's more out there, there is more out there. For me, it's just always paid off. So I think you're definitely right about that.
Yeah, and I think that kind of came to mind because that's something I'm working through now. Building a business as a creative. These, just so you know, as I'm saying these words, I'm like throwing up in my mouth a little bit. But building building a business. What? You made a face.
Were you in Italy for your painting retreat during the sailing trip?
Maybe that's where I was. Yeah,
Girl,
that's
yeah,
where I was.
she was on an art retreat. Just you saying that made me realize she was on an art retreat. In where in Italy were you?
I was in Chicago de Preve in Umbria. Yeah, like, honestly, I just, from time to time, I'm like, girl, your life don't suck. My
Don't
life
suck at
does
all.
not, my life
At
does not suck.
all.
So yeah, no, I was in Italy for a painting retreat, and I went with a woman who does abstract art, and her philosophy is, I think her tagline is "broke artist my ass." Like, that's her whole thing. She started in her 40s and 50s or whatever. So I went on this retreat with her, and I was like, well, if I'm going to Italy, I might as well go to Spain first if I'm going to use these freaking flyer points. So I was in Europe while they were in Greece sailing. So yeah, like I said, I wasn't mad at having missed it, but I'll get them on the next one. But one of the things that I am dealing with right now is wrapping my head around starting a business as an artist and what that looks like, and really kind of owning it, which is so funny to me because I made a lot of white people some money doing stuff that I really didn't care about.
But now you got to do it for yourself.
But
And
now I have to do it for myself, and it's just the feelings of imposter syndrome coming up, and the universe has told me, baby, people have reached out to you proactively to purchase things of yours. You don't have a website. You haven't listed prices. You haven't done it. Right. I didn't put my name on my Instagram page until right before I moved here. But I think one of the things that I have, and again, maybe this circles back to earlier discussions, is this challenge around being seen if I can't manage the perception. Right. And part of being a creative in this day and age is people want to know your story. They want to know who you are. And I'm not shy, obviously, but I still sometimes am challenged around, like in conversation, I'm good, but I'm still sometimes challenged about putting myself out there. So, challenging myself, Stephanie's next YouTube. I'm saying this out there out loud and for the world to hear, well, the world, but I'm gonna look into a YouTube channel because I think there's something there about I'd like to allow other women to tap into their creativity. I think
Mhm.
there's something there, every little kid, you give them a crayon and a piece of paper, and they will show you and tell you that they are a creative genius. And somewhere that switch happens, and we become judgmental and critical, and we don't stop.
Mhm.
And I'm still learning and working my way through that. But I love helping other people do that as well. And I've done some workshops with women, and I love doing that. And so I want to find a way to sort of transition that onto an online platform. So that's one of my plans for YouTube, and coupling that with actually creating my own work. And so that's that, you never go wrong when you bet on yourself message is not just for everybody listening here, but also for myself. Because what do I have to lose? I'm already retired.
Mhm.
There's nothing to lose. And yet there's still this little negative voice back here. But I'm not going to pay her any mind.
She can't control you. She's not the boss of you.
Not at all.
Hater. Just a hater. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. This was fun.
I knew it would be. I knew you'd be like, okay. It's a good time because you can talk.
Moi?
Thanks to everyone who joined us today. Dara has been such a positive influence on my Mexico City experience. I'm very glad she's here with us. Where can they find your art and more information about you?
So right now you can find me on Instagram. My handle is Dara_herring_art.
Okay, I will drop it in the description. So if you're watching this on the replay, it will be there already. If you are in my YouTube membership, we're going to meet after this on Zoom. You know where to find the link in the posts. And I will see the rest of you next week, where we'll have another familiar face from the audience joining me. So thank you to everyone for being here. And until next time, live your best life.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.